Hi, I'm Ray, welcome back to my channel and to a wrap up of everything that I read in January this year. I'm super excited because I've finally got some bookshelves up so I can film with my books behind me and also just have my books in my space, which makes me incredibly happy. The slight downside of filming in this room is that there's a really noisy main road just outside. So I apologise for all the sounds of buses going past, etc. There's not really very much I can do about that, unfortunately. It's one of the problems of living in London. So this year's reading started off really nicely with a book called Just Ella by Annette Larsen, and this was recommended to me by Kate Howe, and it was exactly the kind of book that I needed to get me in the flow of reading. It was free on Kindle Unlimited. I've been enjoying reading with my Kindle lately. I've just been finding it super convenient. I got a free Kindle Unlimited subscription for January, so I read a couple of books using that. Just Ella is a sweet romance about a young princess who falls in love with a gardener in the palace, and it was just a real page turner. Ella was a great character. The romance was really gorgeous and sweet. I loved the fact that it wasn't one of those enemies to lovers romances, which I feel is basically the romance plotline in like every single piece of media ever, but that Ella and the gardener kind of had this instant connection and really just understood and got on well with one another. It was light, it was a page turner, and I think I got a real kind of reading boost from just reading something quite quickly and getting to the end of it quite quickly and feeling immersed in a book as I was reading it. That was exactly what I needed to kickstart the year. I then went on to read a book that was recommended on Miranda Mills's channel, and this is Wintercombe by Pamela Belle. This is also available for free on Kindle Unlimited, at least in the UK, and this was absolutely wonderful. It was such a great book to kickstart the year with. It's fairly chunky, I think around 600 pages, and it tells the story of a young Puritan wife during the time of the English Civil War. Her husband is away fighting for the Roundheads, and her house comes under occupation from the royalists, so the enemy side effectively occupies her house. And this house, Wintercombe, is actually based on a real house that you can go and visit that I now desperately want to go and visit because I really fell in love with the house during the book. And it's a house that really has kind of a character of its own that definitely influences the plot in a number of directions, and it's also a house that our protagonist, who's called Silence, interestingly, that she really loves and adores. It was just a fascinating piece of historical fiction. You could tell it was really well researched. I don't normally read historical fiction from pre-Victorian era very much. I tend to find that I don't enjoy it that much, but this was just brilliant. The Civil War is a fascinating time period to read about, and this book was such a good balance of a properly dramatic plotline. I really felt like I was watching a period drama in my head whilst I was reading the book, which I don't often feel. There were definitely times where I was completely on tenterhooks wanting to know what happened next, where I was kind of almost gasping with surprise at the way that the plot turned. It was a real page turner, whilst at the same time having loads of fascinating domestic detail about the meals that they ate, the way that the household like that was run in that time, with the servants, what jobs needed doing, the work of the mistress of the household to keep all of this running. There were so many interesting descriptions throughout. I felt so immersed in the time period, and I also just thought the characters were also well drawn. I really came to love some of them, or, you know, the ones who were villains you really love to hate. It was a deeply satisfying, fascinating work of historical fiction, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. My first 5-star read of the year. This is actually the first in a quartet of books, but I would say that it very much works as a standalone. I have actually started reading the next book just because I cared for the characters so much and the world, and I wanted to spend more time there, but at the same time I think you could totally just read the first book and that would be a really fulfilling experience in and of itself. The next book which I finished was an audiobook, and this was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I kind of have an ongoing project of rereading these in French as a way to just keep up my French language, and I'm actually so proud of myself for getting this far and for the fact that I can really just listen to these now almost as if they were in English. I don't really notice that it's in French, and given that I've worked hard at French for so many years of my life, I'm finding that really fulfilling. It's also getting really interesting for me because I haven't reread these books since I was probably like a teenager when they came out. I definitely really intricately knew the plot lines of the first 3 books, but going on into the longer books, I don't have so much of an idea of what's happening, and I'm actually finding things really surprising, and my memory of the books is sometimes not marrying up to what the books actually are. So I really, really enjoyed The Order of the Phoenix a lot more than I thought I was going to. I'd remembered it not being a favourite, but I actually think it might be up there as possibly my favourite of the whole series. Largely because the thing that I love about Harry Potter is just the world. It's the time that you spend in Hogwarts, it's the time that Harry spends hanging out with the Weasleys. I really enjoy everything in this book that happens at Grimmauld Place. There's just so much kind of atmosphere in this book and time spent immersed in the wonderful world, and that is by far my favourite part of the story. I have never been a Harry Potter lover to the extent that some people are. I am really enjoying the process of rereading them now, and I do think they are wonderful books to reread, particularly if you're looking at developing a second language, because we're so familiar with the world, with the characters, and in many cases also with the plot lines, that's really helpful when you're trying to kind of simultaneously integrate perhaps new vocabulary that you don't know already. But I'm not sure whether these will ever be 5-star reads for me, largely just because I'm so uninterested in the Voldemort plotline, which is kind of the main point of the books. And I also really don't particularly like Harry or Ron as characters, especially in this book. Both of them are awful. I'm basically just there for Hermione and the side characters. I also do find that in these later books, they seem to get dark without there really being a necessity for the darkness. Like, some of the Umbridge plotline really frustrates me. I think it's just a bit too twisted unnecessarily, and I found that wasn't really addressed or completed within the plot line in this book, which bothered me. So there are irks that I have with the story. However, overall, this was such an immersive listening experience. It was something that I really enjoyed listening to, and I genuinely feel really proud of myself for getting through such a long work in French, particularly because the earlier ones were taking me almost like a year each to get through. I was taking them really slowly, whereas with this I listened to the whole thing in pretty much just in January, I think, which was a lot of listening. It was a really, really long audiobook. Finally, last book that I read in January was Hypnobirthing by Marie Mongan. I am currently pregnant, hence the pregnancy-related books, and I feel like I've read a slightly random collection because I didn't really want to buy any pregnancy books. They obviously serve like a very specific time point of your life. So I literally just went to the library and saw what was on the shelves and took out a selection of books that sounded interesting. I've heard about hypnobirthing a lot. I think it's quite like the thing in birthing at the moment. So it was interesting to read the book, but I kind of felt like it was a bit of a waste of time. To be honest, I think hypnobirthing is a very practical thing. If you haven't heard of it before, it's basically just breathing and visualization techniques to help you manage labour. And it annoys me that it's called hypnobirthing because I feel like that's a super off-putting name for something which is actually very sensible. Obviously I want to have breathing and visualization techniques that are going to help me to get through labour. That makes sense. However, I feel like this is the sort of thing that you should do as a course rather than reading the book. In fact, in the book, it quite often references, you will learn how to do this in the course, which was kind of frustrating given that I was hoping to learn how to do it from the book. If any of you watching have given birth before and have any recommendations of books on childbirth that you found really, really helpful, or have any experience with hypnobirthing and would really encourage me to do a course or think it's not worth bothering, then let me know. I'm currently thinking I will probably see what I can scrounge about it for free on the internet, but I don't really want to pay for an actual course on hypnobirthing. And to be honest, I've just finished another book on labour and birth, which I will, I guess, mention in my wrap-up next month. And I kind of feel like I'm a bit done with reading about labour and birth. I think I'm absorbing so much more information about it via video and online content, and that probably works better for me than reading about it. A lot of books tend to feel quite dated, and this one is definitely part of that category. So that was my whistle-stop tour of my first reading month of the year. I would love to know what you read in January, how your first reading month of the year went. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you don't do so already. It really does help. I'm so enjoying being back in the flow of reading more regularly and reflecting on what I read and posting videos again. So thank you to everybody who's been watching and commenting. I really appreciate you. I love interacting with you all. Hope that you're doing well, and I will see you next week in another video. Bye bye.